Cinderella was invited to a splendid ball. "You shall look beautiful," beamed her fairy godmother. She waved her wand at the lacy patterns of frost on the window. In a twinkling, Cinderella was wearing a ball gown made of lace, just like the frost. "It is very cold," mused the fairy godmother. She waved her wand towards the snowflakes falling outside, and in a flash, Cinderella had a beautiful cloak of white feathers, just like snowflakes. And now a necklace. The fairy godmother waved her wand at the icicles hanging from the trees outside, and Cinderella was suddenly wearing a fine diamond necklace. "Enjoy yourself," smiled the fairy godmother, and she vanished. But then in came Cinderella's wicked stepmother and her ugly daughters, Anastasia and Genevieve. "I want that dress." "How awful, Anastasia, ... double quotes, I want that cloak," screeched dreadful Genevieve. "And I want those diamonds," cried the stepmother. So they went to the ball, dressed in Cinderella's finery, and left her to sweep the kitchen. But the fairy godmother was cross. She waved her wand, and the diamonds became icicles again. The feathers became snowflakes, and the dress became frost. And in the heat of the ballroom, they began to melt. "Ooh, ee, og," squealed the stepmother and her daughters. Everyone was laughing at them, and they ran home as fast as they could. A-tis-hoo, a-tis-hoo. All three caught bad colds, and kind Cinderella tucked them into bed and gave them hot lemon and honey to drink. "That will teach them to take Cinderella's belongings," chuckled the fairy godmother. As the stepmother and her daughters sniffled and sneezed in bed, wrapped in warm blankets, Cinderella continued to care for them with kindness. She brought them steaming bowls of soup, gently placed cool cloths on their foreheads, and even read them soothing stories by candlelight. Though they had wronged her, Cinderella's heart was too gentle to hold a grudge. The fairy godmother watched from afar, her eyes twinkling with admiration. "Such a pure heart deserves a greater reward," she murmured. With a flick of her wand, a golden envelope appeared on the kitchen table. Cinderella gasped as she picked it up. It was an invitation from the prince himself, requesting her presence at a royal banquet the next evening. "You have won not only his admiration, but his heart, my dear," the fairy godmother whispered. The next day, as her stepmother and stepsisters lay recovering, Cinderella hesitated. She had always dreamed of a grand life beyond the kitchen, but she could not ignore the family who, for all their cruelty, now depended on her care. With a sigh, she turned to her fairy godmother. "I would love to go, but who will take care of them?" The fairy godmother chuckled and tapped her wand against the floor. "Kindness, dear child, always finds its way back to you." In an instant, the stepmother and sisters sat up, their illness cured. "Cinderella," croaked Anastasia, rubbing her eyes. "Why did you take care of us, after all we did?" Cinderella smiled gently. "Because that's what families should do." Overwhelmed with guilt, the stepmother and sisters exchanged glances. For the first time, they saw Cinderella not as a servant, but as someone far better than them in every way. "Go to the banquet," said Genevieve, her voice softer than before. "You deserve it. Double quotes. For the first time in her life, Cinderella walked through the front door, not as a maid, but as a lady of grace and kindness. And and as she stepped into the royal carriage, her stepmother and sisters watched in silence, knowing they had lost something far greater than gowns or jewels: Cinderella's love and forgiveness, which they had never truly deserved. And so, under the glow of the palace chandeliers, Cinderella danced once more, this time, not just in magic, but in the warmth of a future she had created with her own kindness. As Cinderella stepped into the grand carriage, her heart pounded with excitement and a hint of nervousness. This time, she wasn't going to the ball under the guise of magic that would fade away at midnight. She was going as herself, as someone who had earned her place through kindness, patience, and resilience. As the carriage rolled through the village, people peeked out from their windows and doors, whispering in awe. They had always seen Cinderella as the quiet girl in rags, yet tonight she shone with a grace that surpassed even the grandest ladies in the kingdom. Upon arriving at the palace, Cinderella was greeted with a sight more dazzling than she could have imagined. The ballroom was alight with golden chandeliers, their glow reflecting off the marble floors. Musicians played a soft, enchanting melody as nobles in splendid attire swirled across the dance floor. The moment she stepped in, all eyes turned to her. The whispers grew louder, but this time they were filled with admiration, not mockery. The prince, standing at the far end of the hall, looked up and his face broke into a joyful smile. "Cinderella," he breathed as he strode towards her, taking her hands in his. "I feared I would never see you again." She lowered her gaze with a soft smile. "I feared the same, Your Highness. But here I am, double quotes. The prince led her to the dance floor, and as they waltzed, Cinderella felt lighter than air. Unlike the first ball, where she had danced under borrowed magic, tonight she danced as herself. No spells, no disguises, just the girl who had captured the prince's heart with her kindness. As the night went on, the prince finally led her to the palace gardens, where the stars shimmered above the fountains. "I have searched for you ever since that night," he confessed. "Not because of your gown or your jewels, but because of the way you looked at the world. I have met many noble ladies, but none with a heart as pure as yours." Cinderella's eyes glistened. For the first time in her life, someone saw her not as a servant, not as an orphan, but as someone worthy of love and respect. The prince knelt before her and took her hands. "Cinderella, will you stay by my side? Not just as a princess, but as my partner, my equal." Cinderella's heart swelled. She had never dared to dream of such a moment. But before she answered, she thought of her stepmother and stepsisters. Back at home, the stepmother and stepsisters were startled to receive a royal invitation of their own. They arrived at the palace expecting punishment, but instead, Cinderella welcomed them with open arms. Though they were ashamed of their past cruelty, she assured them that the future was theirs to shape. And from that day on, the palace was filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Cinderella ruled not with power, but with compassion, proving that true nobility lay not in titles, but in the kindness one shared with the world. And so she lived not just happily ever after, but wisely, kindly, and forever loved.